Thanks, Janelle, for the introduction. So my name is Shawn Martin. I'm with the International Code Council, and I'm going to be talking with you a little bit today. Well, actually, we'll go back one. There we go. About the International Green Construction Code. And the first thing I want to do is congratulate you because we're doing a lunch and learn, and the word code showed up in it, and you guys came anyway. And I'd like to thank you for that because I know that the word code is like kryptonite, but I understand from some of the people talking to them before, the word lunch helps to offset the word code. So hopefully you'll find this interesting. This is a really different kind of code, and I'll be talking about that a little bit. So just to kind of dive in, and if you have questions, I'm pretty informal. Just ping me if you need to. Okay, so just a quick word about who ICC is, because I find that if I don't say this, I just have to answer the question later. ICC is the International Code Council, and essentially we're a member-based organization. We have to have a picture of our building because it's obligatory, of about 57,000 members from around the U.S. Interested in building safety and building environments. We have about 350 local chapters. A lot of our members are building officials, but certainly not all of them. And when I say building officials, we're talking code officials of various stripes, fire officials, code officials, zoning officials, on and on. And then a lot of building professionals, architects, engineers, you name it. We have about 300 staff at ICC in 4 regional offices. Our codes are used, we have 15 model codes, and I'll explain what that means, and they're used in all 50 states. So since our codes are used in every state, we have staff scattered, some of us are scattered around the country to support that. I'm based here in Pittsburgh, and so I provide support in Western Pennsylvania and in West Virginia. So, has anybody heard of where ICC came from? We've been in existence for about 10 years, but we were the result of the formation. There used to be 3 primary regional code organizations. So have any of you heard of BOCA? Probably from days gone by, yeah. So ICC is the result of the merging of BOCA, ICBO, and SBCCI. ICBO was more of a West Coast code organization, kind of similar to BOCA, but headquartered more in the West, and then SBCCI, Southern Building Council, was in the Southeast. So the 3 merged. There was a recognition that we really needed a unified voice on codes. So if any of you are wondering where the heck did BOCA go, that's ICC now. So what do? We develop codes. First and foremost, that's our bread and butter. That's what we do best. We also develop a few standards. And then we do a lot of training, education, and certification to support those codes. Not a surprise there. We also do product testing and certification, and we have a sister company that does laboratory accreditation. So, all right. So I don't want to dwell on the ICC thing, and just kind of wanted to set some context for you. Let's talk a little bit about building codes and how they're adopted in Pennsylvania, because that's inevitably, you kind of have to bring what I'm going to be sharing with you back to Pennsylvania context. Pennsylvania, you've probably all heard of the Uniform Construction Code, the UCC. The Uniform Construction Code in Pennsylvania is based on ICC's model codes, okay? So essentially the way it works is ICC develops what are called model codes. They are, think of them as like a template, a starting point. There are 40,000 jurisdictions around the United States that adopt building codes in one way, shape, or form, whether it's at the state level, the township level, the city, the town. If you add them all up, 40,000. If each and every one of them sat down and wrote a code from scratch, it would be a mess. And in fact, it would be what we used to have, which was a mess. Where the model code idea came from was this idea that you would have building professionals get together on a regular basis and craft the best of the best that we know how to put together using an open public process. And then we put it out there. And jurisdictions can use it if they want to, or they can sweep it aside and ignore it, make their own, whatever. But it's a template that represents the best knowledge that's available at the time. And so that's what we do. And Pennsylvania uses our codes, and like I said, all 50 states use them in some way, shape, or form. In Pennsylvania, the Uniform Construction Code Act was passed in 1999. It went into full effect, full regulatory effect in 2004. And then it established something called the Review and Advisory Committee, which is a committee, I'm going to say it's 12 people, I think, at the state level under the Department of Labor and Industry that get together and review the codes coming from ICC and make determinations as to whether Pennsylvania should adopt them. There is a process that allows local jurisdictions to change the state code, but by and large, The state code applies to the entire state, and local jurisdictions can only make it more stringent if they wish to. They can't go below the state code. There is a lot of turmoil in this right now. Pennsylvania is behind. When I say behind, ICC comes out with codes every 3 years. So we name them by version, just kind of like a, it's like the cars. You have the 2014 cars. We have the 2009, 2003, every 3 years, the 6, so on and so forth. Pennsylvania is on the 2009 ICC model codes. We are about to release our 2015 model codes. Pennsylvania skipped the 12s entirely, and we're waiting to see what they'll do with the 15s. So now Pennsylvania is 2 code cycles behind, and there's a lot of efforts going on around that to bring Pennsylvania up to date. There's some legislation. There's Senate Bill 1023 seeking to revise the way that's done. There's another bill I understand was just introduced. So if you're interested in the state level, there's a lot going on there. This is important to you because it limits what happens at the state level really dictates what happens here in Pittsburgh. There's some latitude to change the code locally, but not a lot. The state is primarily controlled at the state level. Okay, so let's talk about sustainability in the codes. You're all familiar with the code. Probably you've bumped into it a lot of times. Here's the thing. The problem with the codes that we've had with sustainability in construction, and a lot of these are probably well known to you, is that a lot of the benefits may not be tangible to the building owners. It's always about how do you build a value proposition? How do you build this desire on the part of building owners and developers to build green? A lot of times it may not be tangible. If you make, for example, you build a building with a really good indoor air quality, it's really hard for the building owner or occupant to say what it would have been like if you hadn't done that. It's not like they're going to walk and go, wow, great air quality in this building. Not going to happen, all right? So the tangibility is an issue. And frankly, a lot of things you don't see. Granite countertops, you see. R22 in the walls, you don't see. All right, so it's, you're going to see it in your energy bills, but again, same thing. You don't know what it would have been if, R13 had been used. You just don't know. And a lot of times, in order to roll up the benefits, it's a little bit from everybody. So what we're looking at is societal level benefits. We want to have more water available. We want to bring fewer power plants online. We want to do all that. Well, just doing it in one building isn't going to change any of that. You have to have benefit on building by building by building. So what you need is wide-scale adoption. That's our problem, okay? If 2% of the people are doing it, we're not going to see that societal level change. So the question is, how do we produce measurable societal benefits? Cut the amount of water that Alcosan has to put out. Reduce the number of power plants that have to be brought online to meet the energy needs of Pittsburgh. That requires wide-scale adoption. Well, the codes are one way to do it. Now, we've done this various ways. Obviously, there's LEED, which is voluntary in many cases, not always. There's other methods to do it. The codes are a regulatory instrument. So voluntary adoption is one option. Codes are another. Codes say you must do this, you must do this, you must do this. And in a lot of cases, and I hear it all the time. How dare society, the government, tell me what I can and cannot do on my own property? Well, the fact of the matter is we have limits. Now, where we put those limits is important. We made a lot of decisions. We've decided that there's limits on where you can put a billboard. As an owner of a property, I'm very happy that somebody didn't erect a 2-story billboard right next to my home. I would have an issue with that. Again, I don't want to infringe on what my neighbor can do, but as a society, we've determined that there are certain limits we want to put in place so that we all get along together nicely. Noise is another good example. It might all be on my neighbor's side, but I'd really rather have a lumber mill right next to my house for obvious reasons. So what we have is a consensus process whereby experts get together and we talk about where to draw the line. What things we want to leave as much individual liberty as we can, but where does societal benefit need to come into play? So with codes, we have an existing method for adoption, amendment, enforcement. So we have this vehicle that we've been using for safety. The question is, how do we apply it to sustainability? So here's kind of what we've seen so far, and I should note the IgCC, the ICC Green Code, works with LEED. LEED is one of our partners on this. I'm sorry, with USGBC on this, but it also is coordinated with LEED. So what we're finding is, generally speaking, and it varies by market and so on and so forth, but really we've seen kind of the voluntary move into the sustainability arena in general across all building sectors has been 30% maybe. That's where people say, hey, I'm going to choose to build to LEED Silver or LEED whatever. The problem that creates is this leaves us with the 70%, unchanged, okay? That's a problem, because remember what we said before, if we want to enact wide societal change, we need to have wide-scale adoption. So the question is, how do we address that 70% to get the kind of societal change that we're looking for? Well, the result of that concern is the IgCC. Our concern is not so much the 30%, all right? This is what LEED is addressing now. These folks are voluntary, these are early adopters. They're going for it. And that's great. We don't want to do anything to impede that, but we want to find a way to get at these folks. So the IgCC is designed to be consistent with the existing codes. We want to remove every single barrier we possibly can. We want to make sure that when the green code says you shall do this, it doesn't conflict with what the building code says, or the plumbing code says, or the mechanical code. So they're designed to be consistent. Again, there's a premium placed on health and safety. If there's ever a question, health and safety trumps, period. We like being sustainable, but we don't want to hurt people in the process. And it needs to be widely applicable, new construction, existing buildings, and alterations. So I should note that addressing sustainability in the base codes isn't really new. It has started creeping in over the years. So in the past, codes were all about health and safety. We don't want buildings to fall on people, burn people, in any way harm anybody. Those are pretty straightforward. We can do that. But there's always been this other little thing that says codes are also about the welfare of individuals in a community. Well, what does that mean, welfare? And that's the angle that sustainability has been addressing. So there's a lot of different things where in the codes where we've already started going down this road. A lot of you are familiar with the energy code. ICC produces that as well. That was kind of the first foray into it. That's sustainability, but focused on one topic. All right, and so that's already been adopted in 40 some odd states. Think of the IgCC, the green code, as taking the energy code and expanding it to all the other sustainability topics like water and materials and so on and so forth. The other thing that's interesting about the green code is comprehensive. It isn't just one topic like the IECC, the energy code. So here's kind of how we've, as a society, worked through it. We started out with health and safety. Codes came about because in the 1800s, early 1900s, entire cities were burning down. It was not generally a good thing. Think the Great Fire in Chicago, the multiple Great Fires in Boston, think San Francisco, so on and so forth. We could not sustain those kinds of societal losses in a modern society. We can't have that. So we put in base provisions to improve the flammability of buildings and so on and so forth. And then once this improved, we kind of said, hey, it would also be nice if the buildings lasted a little while, not just burned down or didn't fall down. Beyond that, the codes started getting into maintenance. We don't want them to burn down or fall down, and we want them to stick around for a while. And if they stick around for a while, it'd be nice to be able to keep them running. So let's make them maintainable. So all these things people didn't have a big problem with. Here's where things started getting a little hairy. Then people started to say, hey, why don't we also require that the codes protect the stuff in the building, not just the building? Some people had a problem with that. And that's always been a point of contention in the codes. So it's a question of, when the sprinklers kick on in a building, are they designed to keep the fire down enough so you have time to get out? Or are they designed to put the fire out and keep from burning everything down? That's an important distinction. And there are different systems depending on the different intent. And that gets controversial. And this plays out in our code hearings. People can argue about this till the cows come home and then some. And then sustainability. And that has been hugely controversial. So some people in the code community think that the codes have no business in sustainability, that it's an individual community thing, and that we shouldn't apply them universally. Others believe that it is a place where we should go. The result of that was that ICC created a separate book. And the idea was that those communities that wish to pursue sustainability through the codes can do so, and those that wish not to can just simply avoid it. So here's an example of a place where sustainability has showed up in the code. I know you all knew, I'm an engineer, so you all knew I was going to have to do a schematic at some point here. But this is a good example. So in the code, there is a requirement that says if you have a water heater, that's the thing here, and you have a hot water delivery system in it, that's why you have a hot water heater, the farthest outlet, the farthest faucet or whatever uses that hot water can be no more than 50 feet from the source. No more than 50 feet. Why? Well, there's no safety issue there. It's all about preserving natural resources, about limiting energy use, ensuring that the water that shows up at the faucet is actually hot, that kind of thing. So again, this is nothing new, and we have lots of other provisions like that have stayed in there, basic sustainability. And yeah, that's what the code says, but I know. Other thing we have limits on the amount of water that different things can use. Again, lavatories can't use any more than 2.2 gallons per minute. Why? There's no health or safety issue there. It's just the maximum. So this is a sustainability thing in the base codes right now and in force in Pennsylvania. So getting into the IgCC, this, again, like I said, is building on what was done in the energy code that was developed. The energy code was focusing on the highest ROI, energy, the thing where the most benefit can be derived. And that's been around for a while, and it's widely adopted in 40-some-odd states in the U.S. in various forms. Now, again, Pennsylvania is falling behind with the 2009 energy code. We now have the 2015. Hopefully, they'll upgrade it soon. So like I said, what we're doing with the green code is we're taking what the code has traditionally done, dealt with life, health, and safety. Don't burn down, fall down, you name it. And we're layering on top of that sustainability. So all this stuff that the code has traditionally done is still there. It hasn't changed. We've just added sustainability goals to it. So it is what we call a code overlay. And the other thing is, this is different from LEED in that it is not a rating system. There is not an IgCC gold, silver, platinum. It's just simply a set of requirements. You must do this, you must do that, you must do that. Now, sometimes we give different options. You can do this or this, but just make sure you do one of them. So this is not a matter of doing a huge amount of certification after the fact. It's meant to be addressed by a building inspector who walks in and said, the code said you have to do this. Did you do it? Yes or no? Boolean. And the intent here is to drive green building into everyday practice. This is not intended to be going after the bleeding edge adopters. That's LEED's position in the marketplace. That's what LEED does well, the people who voluntarily want to do things. This is meant to kind of raise all boats a little bit and consistently raise all boats and then allow LEED to build on top of this. This is meant to be part of a tiered strategy and structure. And that's exactly the way USGBC has been talking about working with it. Just one thing to emphasize is the idea of a systems approach. It is integrated. You'll find that it's built more like LEED in that it's organized around sustainability topics. It's organized around water efficiency, around energy efficiency, so on and so forth. Our existing codes are built around trades, plumbing, mechanical, so on and so forth. This code is built around sustainability topics. Why? Because we recognize that no one trade has a corner on any particular sustainability area. So for example, plumbers, while they primarily deal with water, you would think that, okay, we could just assign water efficiency to them. It's not that simple because you still have to heat the water. You still have to bring in all these other things. So plumbers deal with water and energy and material resources and so on and so forth. And what we want to do is advocate the working of the different disciplines together to bring about a comprehensive whole. And my point that I like to make is if they work in isolation, if you have the plumbers aren't talking to everybody else, they're making a green plumbing system in the building. And the mechanical guys are making a green HVAC system, but they're not talking to anybody. And the structural guys, green shell, and they put it all together, you're not going to get a green building. Why? Well, because if the plumber isn't talking to the HVAC guy, isn't talking to the structural guy, they're not going to interface well. They're not going to work, and you're not going to get your outcome. You can have your mechanical guy put in a fantastic HVAC system, high efficiency, wonderful, but if on the site they don't orient the building properly and they put a whole load of glass facing south, you can have this poor high efficiency HVAC system striving mightily to overcome this massive thermal load from all the glass in the front that doesn't have a good thermal reflectance. So it has to work together, and that's why we do the IgCC the way we do. So again, not a rating system. We're not intending to replace them. We're intending to work with them. The idea is have the provisions consistent with LEED So if somebody builds to the IgCC and they also want to go LEED, they can. Or in the future, they want to go existing building, they can. We don't want them to have to go back and say, oh, darn, I did recycling in the IgCC, but now I got to do it differently under LEED. That defeats the point. We're trying to raise the floor of sustainability, and what we're trying to do is get massive environmental benefits. We would, in this case, for this product, we want to see it adopted much more widely. Maybe it doesn't take things quite as far as LEED does, but if we have widespread adoption, we've created a good foundation for LEED, and we've had a substantive societal benefit. It is correlated to our base codes, and these are our 15 model codes. In case you're wondering what do they have? Well, the IBC, the International Building Code, is what you're probably most used to, but we have a residential code, a fire code, swimming pool, energy, mechanical, plumbing, zoning, fuel gas, property maintenance, on and on. So, and yes, we put I before everything. Please don't ask me why. I really don't know. The IgCC, I should also note, works with ASHRAE 189.1. 189.1 is packaged with it and is an alternate compliance method for a good chunk of it. So an early decision that is made by a jurisdiction using the green code is, are they going to take the ASHRAE 189 route for energy, or are they going to go with the IgCC? And it's also an option for the building developers. These are our partners in developing it. We developed it in conjunction with the American Institute of Architects, ASTM, ASHRAE, Illumination Engineering Society, and then USGBC as well. So we've really had fantastic support from these various members. So what it addresses, first of all, the green code addresses commercial installation primarily. So what we're talking about, it does not address residential buildings. For the most part, it simply refers residential buildings, single family or multifamily, 3 stories or less, to something known as ICC 700, National Green Building Standard. That's another thing. So it's primarily trying to address commercial construction. It does apply to sites. It's not limiting itself just to the building perimeter. It's also addressing the lot around the building, because we know they're connected when it comes to sustainability. There's a number of things that are unique about the green code. First of all, it's the idea of code layering. You're not replacing your existing codes. So if, for example, the city of Pittsburgh chose to adopt the IgCC, it wouldn't replace the existing codes. It would just simply layer on top of them. It would work with them. There is the ability to do some localization. I'll talk about that. It goes beyond code minimum. We have a new organization material. It's organized around sustainability topics, not trades. New ways to adopt it, and this idea of more than just pass-fail. We want to get beyond the point. I've heard it said that the code is the minimum you can build a building to and not go to jail. We want to get people beyond the point where they're thinking about what's the very least I can do to get out of here and not get in trouble. So, real quickly, like I said, this is different than what we've talked about before. So think of it as apples and oranges. So codes, again, these are different. They have minimum requirements. They're not saying gold, silver, platinum, just you must do this. They're developed by a consensus process, and they're enforced by law. You shall do this. Standards are a different animal. There's a different method of developing them, and usually they're referenced by codes. So like there's standards for the plug in the wall, and basically the electrical code says all plugs must conform to that standard. And then voluntary rating systems are completely different. They use an elective criteria. They are looking for performance. Save 20% of water, you figure out how to get there. Again, that's a good thing. That gives flexibility, but then you need third-party certification in many cases. And they still have to be subject to code review. So this isn't a matter of replacing anything. It's just bringing in a different option to augment them. So I mentioned layering. This is kind of a graphic to show that. So again, the foundation is life, health, and safety. Okay? And that's where we have the building code, residential code, so on and so forth. The next step for a jurisdiction would be to add an energy code. And most jurisdictions already have that. So that's improving significantly. Now you notice it hasn't replaced this. This is still here. We just added requirements. Then if you want to take the performance to a higher level, that's where you add ASHRAE 189, the IgCC, or LEED, or all of them for that matter. A lot of jurisdictions are saying, you have to build green. Here are your 3 choices. You go pick. We don't care which one you do, just pick one. We see that a lot. This was first developed, we started back in 2009. We came out with the first version, well, the first full version. We came out with 2 interim drafts. It was a long, laborious consensus process where anybody can participate, so it took quite a long time. We published in 2012, and we are now in the process of developing the 2015 version. Every 3 years, we'll update it, just like our other codes. So here's a list of the chapters that you see in it. And again, this should look a lot like LEAD. You know, the scope and application, we have definitions. Jurisdictional requirements goes into how it's adopted. And then we get into the topical areas: site development and land use, materials, resources, energy and CO2 emissions, water, IEQ. And we say IEQ instead of IAQ. IEQ, environmental quality, takes into account not just air quality, but also daylighting, noise levels, so on and so forth. Commissioning, which is a big area of development right now. I got to say, there's a lot going on there. Existing buildings, we have special provisions governing how much you have to update an existing building and bring it up to code. And then there's appendices with these things called electives. We have some things on radon. So how are we doing on time? We're okay? Okay. All right. I was looking for the pointed stick. Oh, no, 12:15. 12:15? Okay. All right. So Chapter 3 just goes in. We have requirements in Chapter 3 for LCA, life cycle assessment. This was very controversial, and a lot of folks, there was one camp that felt very passionately that we have to get LCA into it. Another camp felt very passionately that it's not ready for prime time. So it is optional in this. It just says, if you choose to do LCA, do it this way, but it doesn't say you must. This is where the reference to ASHRAE 189 is. So when it's adopted, folks can, when somebody builds a building to the green code, they can say, I'm going to use 189 on this. That's where they would go about that. And then we have these things called jurisdictional requirements. And what we did was, because there are local conditions that are different everywhere, we put in a number of requirements and allow jurisdictions to essentially turn them on and off. So if you're in Phoenix, for example, you might want to turn on a requirement that says, instead of saving 20% of water, save 30%, or whatever it might be. So it allows you to customize the code when a jurisdiction adopts it and say, we're going to require this and this, but not this. So it gives some flexibility. And then, like I mentioned, life cycle assessment. So Chapter 4 is kind of unique for the codes. Usually the codes stop at the building perimeter. We don't go into the site too much. There are exceptions around stormwater, but this goes a lot further. And this was a little controversial too, but it goes into preservation of natural resources, issues like floodplains, issues like restoration of the site, to pre-development conditions, how to address brownfields, greenfields, on-site percolation of water, stormwater management, landscape irrigation, goes into vegetation, dealing with invasive species, so on and so forth, soil amendment and erosion control. In many cases, it's dealing with problems that were introduced by previous development or previous use of the land. Site waste management, so it's looking at waste not only when the building's in operation, but during construction. Just citing the building, where you put it with respect to local transportation, public transportation options, bike racks. I know bike racks are fun with USGBC. I served on some committees at USGBC, and that was always joked about, that bike racks are the best way to get points. Heat island mitigation and site lighting. We have some provisions on dark sky and things like that. So. Chapter 5 goes into material resource conservation. That's where you're looking at the recycled content, recyclability, things of that sort, and also provisions for recycling when the building is in operation. And then, certain harmful elements like mercury are addressed, and moisture control, looking at keeping moisture out to prevent development of mold and so on and so forth. But overall, it's looking for at least 55% of the materials to be recycled or recyclable, bio-based or indigenous to the area. Some of this should look pretty familiar from LEAD. Chapter 6. Oh boy, Chapter 6 is quite the chapter. So energy, because we already had an energy code, everybody was primed and ready to rock and roll on this, and there was a lot of arguing. And I expect this to be heavily discussed and probably amended during the next version. But essentially, it provides multiple options for reducing energy consumption. But one of them is just simply complying with the latest version of the energy code that we already put out. So that's prescriptive based. I think there are like 4 or 5 different options that you can use to pursue it. So it's meant to be flexible, whether you want to go with prescriptive, you must do this, put in these windows, this insulation, so on and so forth, or if you want to go with more of a performance approach, and we developed a scaler called a ZEPI score. I don't know who came up with that, but it stands for Zero Energy Performance Index, and it's meant to be a way of having energy performance aside to different designs. So, and this also goes into CO2 emission reduction as well. Chapter 7, I'm a water guy, so this is, oh boy, I just bumped the mic. I'm sure everybody's awake now. You guys awake? Chapter 7 goes into water conservation and efficiency. It really promotes the use of non-potable water wherever possible, displacing potable with non-potable of sufficient quality where it's permissible and possible. We all know that we don't need potable water to flush water closets, but we all know that we can't use raw sewage to flush water closets. Somewhere in between is an acceptable level. It varies by location. Different states have different regs on this. Right now, non-potable water is seeing some huge interest in development, but there's so much work to do. So it really encourages the use of the lowest quality water wherever possible permitted within the bounds of public safety. We don't want to make anybody sick, but it's just simply recognizing the fact that to get potable water, you have to invest a lot of energy to get it to potable standards. So the key is, use an appropriate quality of water for the given application. Then we get into efficient use. We get into appliances, all manner of, the traditional dishwasher, washing machines, so on and so forth. Car washes, which is a good area, are required to have certain recycling methods and limits and so on and so forth. And car washes, a lot of car washes around the country have really done a lot to reduce their water consumption and recycle it. Cooling towers is a big one. Cooling towers are used as a means of space cooling for HVAC systems for commercial buildings. There's a lot that can be done to cut water use by cooling towers, and so we have some good provisions there. HVAC systems, there's steam systems, you name it, a lot of different things to reduce water. And then requiring metering, actually getting data and measuring how much water a building is using. I know that sounds, of course we're doing that. Well, actually we're not. A lot of multi-tenant spaces will just have a single meter serving the whole building. And they'll just simply say, okay, this building used X number of gallons. We have 5 tenants, they divide it by 5, and that's how much you each owe. That's fine if you're all similar spaces. If they're all office spaces, that's great. If you've got a dentist's office next door, I can guarantee you they're using way more water than you are, or a restaurant or whatever. And so there's really no incentive for high water users to cut back. So if you have individual metering, now you have feedback on how much you're using, and you can adjust your behavior. Rainwater is a huge area. I'm actually working with a team to develop a standard for this. Rainwater is taking off, and it's the idea that we already have to control stormwater. Let's put it to use. And so that's really exploding. Gray water, there's a lot of interest there too, but a little concern over the contamination. So that's proceeding a little more slowly, but a lot of interest. Reclaimed water is available in some places, and then there's other sources. And I'll move on because I can overdo that one. IEQ, that's where we get into air management, air quality, of course, but we also get into just minimum requirements for HVAC, smoking. IEQ during construction. We don't want the occupants to get sick. We also don't want the construction workers to get sick. Material emissions, VOCs, and then, of course, acoustics and daylighting. Acoustics was a little controversial as well. That's kind of a new area for the codes, but I think it's going to see a lot of development. 9, commissioning and maintenance. As you all know, we've had problems in the past with some of the new systems. A lot of green buildings use some really innovative systems. Unfortunately, they haven't always been set up right from the beginning. And so we find that the performance, expected performance wasn't achieved. Commissioning is intended to address this and ensure that the desired outcome is achieved right from the beginning and then at various points along the way. So the idea is not only to build a sustainable building, but also to see that it operates as designed and continues to operate as designed throughout its life. And actually, we're working with a team on creating a standard for that as well, and I believe ASHRAE is involved in that too. Existing buildings. This gets into just how many changes you need to make for an existing building. It provides some accommodation for historic buildings, which is always important. And just covering the idea of how much we actually need to change if just a portion of an existing building is to be renovated. Then we have this thing called electives in the appendix. And electives is this idea that people might want to go above and beyond. And so what we do is we have various electives, these different places where they can go further. And the idea here is when a jurisdiction adopts the green code, one thing they can do is they can say, look, we have these other things that you can do. Pick 3. We don't care which 3 you pick, but pick 3. Or they could stipulate 3 from energy or 3 from water, whatever. But it gives these above code ideas. And it's also just ideas to spur thinking among developers and architects as to what else they could do. They really want to, moving beyond this idea of let's see how little we can get away with. So there's 2 kinds of electives. The one is jurisdictional, and that's where a jurisdiction would adopt it and say, for us here in the city of, I did it again, in the city of Phoenix, everybody has to cut their water use even further than what the base code says. And then there's others called project electives, and that's where the developer or the architect or the builder picks certain items that they want to go above and beyond on. So this is meant to provide flexibility for different regional variations, flexibility on different building types. It's to mitigate a little bit the very forced lines that are created by a minimum regulation. So it's a little bit more on electives, and it's meant to address, and I think I covered that. Just a bit about that, just to kind of give you a sense. I like pictures. I'm an engineer. I need pictures. But just to give you a sense for a comparison, if you consider green things to be mandatory and blue things to be elective, where you have some flexibility, the green code is primarily mandatory with a little bit of electives. ASHRAE 189 has no electives. It's all mandatory. LEED, new construction, for example, is primarily electives. You have certain goals, and you figure out how to meet them. But there are certain prerequisites, and those are the mandatory items. So it's just a different approach to address a different market segment. 700 is that residential standard I mentioned to you earlier. So where are we used? Don't worry, I'm almost done. Well, before I talk about where we're used, I need to just have a quick side note. There's a lot of different ways. This is used differently than existing codes. So the way that is probably the cleanest is the idea that if somebody has a local green code, they can adopt the IgCC. They can say, okay, here in the city of Pittsburgh, we're adopting the green code. Sometimes they say, we're adopting the green code and ASHRAE 189 and LEED. Pick one. That's what Washington, D.C. does. But that's one way. But another way we're finding is sometimes what they'll do, I'm just going to do that. Oh, that's nice. Okay, I got to work on that. Sometimes they just grab a section of the green code and they throw it into their green code. So it can be used in whole, but we're finding some people are also using it in part. And we're also finding sometimes people will take chunks and throw them into their base codes. An example of that would be North Carolina. North Carolina has not adopted the IgCC as a whole. But what they did say was, we have an interest in rainwater. A lot of people want to do rainwater. So what they did in North Carolina is they grabbed Section 707 on rainwater and they adopted it as an appendix to their plumbing code, and they used that. And that's fine. They can do that. So the reason I say that is there's a lot of caveats as to who has adopted it. Richland, Washington was one of the first. Keene, New Hampshire did. Dallas, Texas just came on, and that was a big adoption. Really nice process they went through. Fort Collins, Boulder. As you can see, not a lot of state level. What's interesting, Rhode Island adopted it, but they said only for state-owned buildings. So in Rhode Island, if you're building a state-owned building, you have to do it. So that's why you need these caveats. Maryland adopted it as an optional code. And basically, because of home rule in Maryland, the state said, hey, we have pre-approved this. We're not telling you you have to do it. We're saying that you on the local level can choose to adopt this if you want to, because they need explicit permission, the way they're set up there. Florida did the same thing. North Carolina grabbed a piece of it, like I said. Oregon is using it in their green code, which is called the REACH code. But they didn't, they left out some things. They changed some things, but that's their prerogative. Phoenix uses a lot of it, again, mostly for commercial. So as you can see, it's not like the other codes where you say, oh, we're adopting the building code. Here it is. It can be parts. It can be pieces. It can apply to certain buildings, not other buildings. It can be one choice of many. Washington, D.C. is finalizing theirs, and they're changing their green ordinance locally, which formally said you have to have LEED silver for anything over 50,000 50,000 square feet, I think. And now they're saying you have to have LEED silver or IgCC over 50,000. So it just gives more options in a lot of places. Like I said, we're in the process of changing the code. We use the same code process for the green code that we use for all of our others. Anybody can submit a change. So back last year, I think the deadline was January of this year. Anybody could submit prior to that date a change. They could say, I don't like section 303 point whatever. You should change it to this. And it's free. Anybody can submit it. And then we post all the changes. We got 500 some odd of them. Then we have a hearing where we have some committees that sit and hear all the changes. And they're coming up in about 3 weeks in Memphis. If you're interested, there'll be webcast as well. And that's where proponents will get up and say, this is why I think we should make this change. I think it's a good idea. Opponents will go up and say, it's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Here's why it's a bad idea. The committee will vote to approve it or to disapprove it or to change it. Then all of those results are posted, and then the public, again, can write in and comment on the outcome. They can say, the committee should have never approved this, and here's why. And then we have another hearing in the fall. And again, in that case, it's open to the entire ICC public safety membership to vote on what goes in it, and that determines what the 2015 Green Code will look like. So it's a consensus process. I don't write it. I wish I could sometimes, because some of the things make me crazy. But staff doesn't write it. We're not even allowed to participate in the process. It's solely developed by volunteer participants in the system, which you guys can as well if you wish. We just debuted a cloud-based system, so everything is now online, as opposed to the archaic things that looked like they came out of the IRS. I don't know, if any of you ever done a code change with ICC? We have these great PDF forms, look like the IRS made them. Anyway, it's all cloud-based now, much nicer. And so now you can log on to our online system. Again, it's free. And you can look at all the changes that have been posted. You can see the little green dot shows you where you are in the process. And it's really a nice way to get involved. What we're seeking to do is provide remote voting for a lot of our members who can't attend the hearings just because travel budgets being what they are. And believe it or not, I'm at the end. So I know that's kind of like drinking from the fire hose. What questions can I answer for you, or are you so stumped that you can't even formulate a question? Yes, sir.
Can you talk about Pennsylvania's process? Like if
Pittsburgh
decided we wanted to adopt the IgCC here from Pittsburgh and perform at BVI level, what would the process be?
Oh, man. Pennsylvania's process is a mess. Right. It is truly a mess. By 2 cycles.
National scale, national. It didn't appear that there were that many cities that have adopted yet, but we wanted to.
No, not a huge number. That would be great. Good question. So, under the Uniform Construction Code Act, local jurisdictions have the ability to change, amend code. There's several steps you have to go through. You have to go through a process of public notification and so on and so forth. And as long as you meet those steps, you can do it. But then there's a process where somebody can challenge what you've done with the Department of Labor and Industry. And if they do that within 30 days, then the Department of Labor and Industry reviews the change and the rationale for it and determines it to be appropriate or inappropriate. And then it's either approved or struck down. The problem with that is a couple things. First of all, if you enact something and you do it properly with public notice and all that, and nobody challenges it, you're good to go. But the problem that we have is it was designed to allow jurisdictions to change existing code. So for example, let's say the code says currently that water closets can consume no more than 1.6 gallons per flush. And Pittsburgh decides we want to make it 1.28. So Pittsburgh would then say, all right, for the city of Pittsburgh, they'd strike that. They put a new number into an existing section of code. The system's designed to handle that. What the system isn't clear on is how to handle brand new codes, brand new stuff. So there's no existing state green code. I mean, we have an energy code, but all the other aspects of the green code aren't addressed in the code. So the question is, how does the system apply when there's no precedent that you're trying to change? You're just trying to do something new. That's unclear. We're not clear how that would be viewed. The law is ambiguous on that point. So what it would fall to is if a jurisdiction like Pennsylvania, like Pittsburgh, wish to push the envelope a little, you have to decide what you want to do. I mean, if you wanted to try and adopt the whole green code, and again, this, the mayor's office or whoever would have to determine what route they want to take. They'd probably have to get their legal team looking at the Pennsylvania statute and determining. But they could just simply say, we're adopting it, go through the steps, and then hold their breath and see if anybody challenges. Probably somebody would. It's almost inevitable if it were something of that scale. And then it would be reviewed by the Department of Labor and Industry, and I don't know what they would do. I really, really don't. So now there are bills. Part of the reason why it's held up is it used to be we used to have a system whereby every 3 years when we came out with a new code, we had something called the Review and Advisory Committee, the RAC. And they would look at this new code, we'd plunk it down, they say, okay, this is the 2012 code. It was adopted, but that committee had the ability to exclude certain things. They say, okay, we're moving to the 2000 whatever code, but we don't like that section and that section and that section, so we're going to cross them out, and that's all they could do. They couldn't write in their own new sections. They couldn't do it. They could only cross things out if they wanted to. We operated under that for a while. Then in 2012, the 2012 residential code came out, and it required all residential structures to have fire sprinkler systems. I don't know if any of you heard about this. Oh, yeah, us too. And some folks had hissy fits. That's putting it kindly. And so changes were made at the behest of certain groups to change the way it was done. And so under the current system now, what the RAC does is when they get a new code, they select what they want to put in. It's the exact opposite. They say, oh, all these things changed? Okay, we want that one, we want that one, we want that one. Instead of, you're getting all these, pick which ones you want to take out. It's completely, and understand that when the codes change, we're talking about thousands of changes over the entire body. So for that reason, the RAC decided just to skip the 2012 codes completely over this one issue. And maybe some things in energy. I know there's some heartburn on some things in the energy code. So now we're in a system where, because of that, it's become, they're now required to review each and every little word change in the code and determine if it's in or if it's out. Well, it's paralyzing. It's such a large task. There's no way this volunteer group who meets a couple times a year could possibly do that. So for that reason, we're kind of stuck in limbo. Now, there's a bill moving through the legislature that would change it a little, and I know there are people that are trying to change it more back to where they were, saying, look, go back to adopting the whole thing and excluding the things you don't like, and maybe tweak it. Maybe, if we say 1.28 toilets, they change it to 1.4 or whatever. No, not that that's a good idea. But they have the ability to tweak it, which they didn't ever have before. So there's a lot of politics around this right now. I don't know where it's going to land. I don't know. But the upshot is time is ticking, and as time is ticking, they're getting farther and farther behind. So another strategy the city of Pittsburgh could consider is say, go to the state and say, we want to adopt the 2015 energy code. You won't update it, so we're deciding to update on our own. And I don't know what would happen. So really, it falls to the administration to look at the law and determine how far they want to stick their neck out and what chances they want to take. But the longer it goes, the bigger the incentive for doing so, because new technologies, a lot of new technologies have come out since the 2009 codes were developed. Because bear in mind, they're labeled 2009, but they were developed a few years before that. It's kind of like cars. If you drive a 2015 car, it was actually designed back in, same with the codes. So we're increasingly having these problems where new technologies are coming out, and Pennsylvania's codes aren't in a position to deal with them because they weren't envisioned when the codes were originally written. And it's getting worse and worse. So the longer this goes, the bigger the problem. And there's all these unrealized gains. So how's that for a long answer? Yes, ma'am.
So related to that, at a more local level, we're hearing from code officials about actually enforcing these codes, given that the codes are now, and these are locally or nationally, given that the codes are now a few years back and there's some new products that may sort of supersede the existing codes.
Yeah, so you're talking about the green code or the life, health, and safety codes, or both?
Either.
Okay, so we're hearing various things. We have 57,000 members, so as you might expect, that covers the entire political spectrum. There are some folks who think that sustainability is a plot by the UN to take away property rights, and it should never be thought about. No. We hear this in Pennsylvania. Literally, there are towns we have to go to and explain to them that we are not the United Nations. I do not fly a black helicopter. Any of those things, literally. You wouldn't believe this. So there's that side that thinks sustainability, don't even say it to me. I don't even want to hear it. And then we got the other side that's saying, yeah, let's push the envelope. In between, there's the majority, it's the usual bell curve. Some of the things I hear an openness to it just because a lot of them are kind of befuddled by LEED. They don't know what to do with LEED. There's LEED consultants running around. They don't know what they're doing. And then they come to them with these crazy technologies that they have no idea what to do with. So a lot of the building officials aren't trained on green. And I'm sure this isn't news to any of you. They don't know it's voodoo, and they're not quite sure how they feel. So there's a healthy skepticism and a little bit of fear, And then the other probably the biggest thing I hear is, okay, that's all well and good, but I don't even have the resources to do what I do now. During the economic downturn, a lot of cities laid off a lot of public servants. Building departments got hammered. And so they lost a lot of inspectors. So whereas a city may have had 2 plumbing inspectors, 3 mechanical inspectors, so on and so forth, now everybody's doing double duty. Maybe you only have 1 and he's doing both or she's doing both and so on and so forth. So they're looking at this and saying, oh, please don't give me another code to enforce. I don't even have the people to enforce the codes I got. That's the number 1 pushback I hear, aside from my black helicopter. I hear that a lot. Anyway, so it's all over the map. How your code officials here look at it, I really don't know. I am still, I boomerang, so I still didn't get to know them a lot. The thing I would encourage you is if this is something you want to know, we do have chapters locally. In fact, they have a chapter meeting tomorrow. I just found out. So I'm going to be going in. And, we'll sit down and we hear what they have to say. But you might want to reach out, but don't be surprised if there's a lot of reluctance around the green code. Within ICC, it has been very, very divisive. There's a whole big chunk of ICC that thinks we should have never done this. And there's a whole big chunk that thinks we should have gone farther. So it's a very divisive issue among the code officials. And it has some generational aspects to it within the code officials, too. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
What's your opinion of the new electronic voting process?
Are you familiar with it? Have you played with it at all? Have you logged on?
Not yet.
Yeah, I think, well, here's the thing. We had to do something. At the code hearings, the attendance has dropped over the years. Budgets got cut, people were busy, and the code hearings, I don't know if have you ever been to a code hearing?
No, but I have
associates that have. I've sat on, before I came to ICC, I sat on the committees. It's an experience, let me tell you. You might want to, it's going to be starting up here, and we webcast it live. And so if you have a problem sleeping or one of your children has a problem sleeping, log in. It's brilliant. It knocks people out like you wouldn't believe. We had a problem because the code here because we got more and more and more proposals, and fewer and fewer people were able to travel to them. And so we were approaching a situation where at some of the hearings, which were going into the night a lot of the time just because there's so many, big decisions were being made by relatively few people, fewer and fewer people, and it was getting concerning. So the idea of it was that we need to give an opportunity for code and safety officials around the country to have input because they can't travel there. So something needed to happen. Personally, I think the new system is nice because I've done, and I work for ICC, so I have to say that. You knew I was going to say that. I've done submissions under the old system. The new one is vastly superior. I mean, you actually go online, you tell it which section you want to change, it puts it in for you, and it says, okay, what do you want to change? And you type in what you want to change, you hit submit. You will be able to go in and actually view video from the hearing on any given issue after the fact going forward. So if you, because let's face it, you're not going to care about all 500 changes to the green code. All right, maybe you really care about 3 of them or 12. You can go in and pull those 12 up and see who got up and said what. It's really powerful that way. There are problems, potential problems or downsides. Some of the issues that have been raised are, well, what happens, because basically at the final hearing, the issue comes up, and then there's 2 weeks afterwards where code officials from around the country will be voting. And there's concern on some people's parts that people will be lobbying them, calling them up and saying, hey, you really need to vote this way. And there's certain things that we can control, and there's certain things we can't. We put in a lot of security. We have ways of checking their credentials to ensure that the right person is voting, but there's the limit that you can do. The honor system has to kick in at a certain point. And so using current technology, I think we've gone as far as we can with it. Is it going to change outcomes and dynamics? No doubt about it. And a lot of it is, we'll see. I do like the current functionality, just based on knowing how the past one worked. Well, there's only one way to go. The old forms made me nuts. Hopefully they're not listening online right now. But anyway, but yeah, I think, you know, a lot has been said about potential pitfalls, and but it was clear we had to do something. If you're familiar with the NFPA process, they also have an online system they're enacting, and so, you know, a lot of the code and standard development organizations are wrestling with this same issue. We want to democratize the process as much as possible. Ideally, we would love to fly everybody in and sit in the room and argue, but not everybody can do that, and we recognize that. So, I know. How's that for the diplomatic answer? Yeah. Yes, sir.
Do you think that it would eventually be changed so that people would have to adopt the whole thing? The reason why I asked is, one point you had this slide talking about if the plumber is green and this person is green, it may not be a green building. But then you say that people are just taking what
they are doing it. And
so it seems like it kind of defeats the purpose a little bit.
well, one thing is we can't control how they use it.
Okay.
You know, we make it available, and we can't say the only way we're going to let you use. Well, I guess we could. We could say the only way you're going to let you use it is if you adopt the whole thing just the way it is. Don't change anything. Yeah. We found that doesn't work real well. All right. So, and there have been internal discussions about this, but the idea has been, you know, let's move, even if they're just moving down the road a little bit on certain things, and we tell them freely, you know, look, it's far better to adopt the whole thing, far better. But if you can't or won't, do what you can. But, you know, there's kind of this, you know, the perfect is the enemy of the good kind of thing, and that's kind of where we are. So the decision was made, you know, let's help communities do what they're able to do and what they're willing to do. But we're very open with them and saying, look, it works best when you adopt the whole thing. Yeah. So, and hopefully more and more will do that as time goes on. This couldn't have come out at a worse time. Introduce a green code during an economic downturn? Not a strategy for success, let me tell you. So what we found is people were looking at it, but a lot of them were just kind of saying, let's just hold until things improve. And now we see things are improving, and a lot of jurisdictions are looking at it and saying, okay, now maybe we're in a position to do something about it. Any other questions I can answer for? Okay. How were the avocados? Wonderful. Yeah. All righty. Well, thanks so much.